Welcome to week 11. This week we're dealing with executives. This is a very interesting chapter. It deals a lot with the idea of executive power. It tells the opening story about how the United States, in its formation, kind of diverged from the United Kingdom, and they really became two different archetypes of what an executive would mean within government, and really kind of sets up the models of either a presidential or a parliamentary system of government. What is it that executives do? Well, in short, they execute. They enforce laws. In order to do that, they generally are the titular heads of the civil service within a country, within the bureaucracy. They have the power to basically direct the bureaucracy to act in a certain way. That's something I think when you look at the past administration of Barack Obama, he found himself doing a lot of things via executive orders that previously had not been sort of the norm, largely, again, owing to hyperpartisanship and gridlock. Um, an important question is the relationship between the executive and the legislature. In a presidential system, the president stands apart. It is indeed a separate institution. Within a parliamentary system, the prime minister generally emanates from the legislature. They are nominally members of the legislature. Once they become prime minister, they are kind of separated, uh, but not necessarily in as formal a sense as you would find in a presidential system. What are some of the formal powers? Of course, most executives, though not all, have the power of the veto. Generally speaking, executives that don't have the veto power are not particularly powerful offices. They have the power in parliamentary system to issue decrees. Certainly in, for example, France, which is also a presidential system, they have decree powers, and the executive in France is actually at least nominally more powerful within the French government than the United States president is. You also have an important, institution of accountability, right? Which within a presidential system would be impeachment, which we should always remember that impeachment is a political remedy for political crimes. It's an act of removing a person from office, not of convicting them of a crime. And then in a parliamentary system, of course, you would have the vote of no confidence, where if a prime minister or the minister's government loses the faith of the membership, then the members have the power to vote no confidence. In which case you would then, that would trigger new elections. What are some of the partisan powers? Of course, in the United States, the president is the leader of their party. That gives them considerable power, as we're discovering now with Donald Trump. When Donald Trump speaks, the Republican Party has a choice to make. They either are going to go along or not, and the act of not going along with the head of your party carries with it considerable significance. In parliamentary systems, coalitions are very important because it's very rare in a parliamentary system for any one party to consistently be able to win a majority of votes. And that means that very frequently they have to form coalition governments. One of the more alien features that you'll read about in this chapter is the idea of a grand coalition, which is often common. It's pretty commonplace actually in Israel, where Likud or Kadima would partner with Labor, which in the United States you would think, Democrats and Republicans forming government together, how could that be? But in Israel, it's pretty commonplace, and because the reason for that is because the parties, there are a multiplicity of parties, and a party that wins a plurality of the vote finds themselves with the position of either cobbling together a huge coalition of a bunch of tiny parties, which oftentimes are very fractious, or joining with the other major party, which is oftentimes considered to be easier to do. And it actually kind of demonstrates the centripetal notion of parliamentary politics a lot of times. Politics is very frequently kind of compelled to, form in a pragmatic center as opposed to spinning out onto the edges like it seems to be doing within our system today. The chapter also addresses the issue of executive stability. And one thing that political scientists, have concluded, though it's by no means a consensus, is that presidential systems have a tendency towards instability, that they tend either to spin out of control and kind of descend into a kind of anarchy where the executive has no authority, or the executive begins gathering more and more authority unto themselves to the point where eventually they transition from being a democratic leader, the leader of a democratic government, to an authoritarian, soft authoritarianism or hard authoritarianism. So those are some of the main issues you're going to deal with in this chapter. As always, if there are any issues, please feel free to contact me directly through email or to ask me questions through the forums. So let's learn a lot this week.